and Caring, A Psychology for Living by Victor Daniels and Laurence J. Horowitz, as read by The Happy President. Part 6, Living in a Relationship, Chapter 27, Conflict and Negotiation. There will always be times when our interests and wishes differ in areas each of us sees as essential to our well-being. Our challenge is to find sane, wise ways to handle these differences. Peggy, who has been married for 3 years, comments, "It was a relief for someone to finally say, conflict in a marriage reflects a relationship that's alive. Too many times I've been ashamed to acknowledge that Jim and I had an argument. I guess I've been perpetuating the myth that happy couples don't fight because no one thinks we ever get angry with each other." Gina adds, "After Marty and I have it out, there's reassurance in knowing we can acknowledge such anger with the other and even love that element in our partner." Conflict exists, suggests social psychologist Morton Deutsch, whenever one person's act prevents, obstructs, or interferes with another person's or injures that person. Conflict, Deutsch points out, is not the same as competition. In competition, each person seeks the same prize. Your victory is my defeat. But conflict can also occur when we agree on what we want to have happen, but disagree about how to make it happen. Thus, it can occur within a larger cooperative context. On the other hand, competition can occur without conflict. Conflict involves interfering with each other's actions. Football and track are both competitive, but football involves conflict and track does not. Conflicts between two persons, notes Kelly, are of two different kinds. Some involve preferences about individual behaviors. You might, for instance, want me to nag you less or act less grumpy around the house. Resolving these conflicts involves learning to exchange behaviors that are more satisfying to each other. Other conflicts involve different preferences about our joint activities, such as where to go this afternoon or when and how to have sex. These problems involve coordinating our feelings and actions in mutually satisfying ways. Handling conflicts constructively. I'm living dangerously when I try to sweep our differences under the rug and mask potential sources of conflict. This creates an atmosphere where you're not sure what's real and what isn't, and you're likely to be wary and untrusting. But if instead of gunny-sacking our conflicts until next year, meal or fight, we deal with them constructively and achieve some closure, they're likely to occupy a relatively small place in our relationship. Constructive conflict resolution with one person can improve other relationships too. If I confront someone with my resentment where it's happening, I'm less likely to misplace my anger onto my mate, my children, my colleagues at work, or my dog. Sources of conflict and support. In a study of young heterosexual couples by Tiggle, Peters, and Kelly, the issues that emerged as the most important sources of conflict were the partners' 1. Carelessness, sloppiness, and impulsivity. 2. Passivity, lack of confidence, lack of ambition. 3. Failure to give appreciation, understanding, and affection. 4. Excessive worry, compulsivity, moodiness. 5. Leisure time, where and how to live, etc. 6. Inadequate and poor communication. 7. Division and fulfillment of responsibility. The things respondents most wanted their partners to continue showing were 1. Sex, affection, love, and appreciation. 2. Understanding, sensitivity, considerateness, tolerance. 3. Encouragement and emotional support. 4. Confidence and ambition. 5. Sensitive resolution of conflicts about leisure time, where and how to live, etc. 6. Adequate division and fulfillment of responsibility. 7. Open and good communication. Value and lifestyle differences that can lead to conflict are especially common in countries where people reflect many ethnic and cultural backgrounds. If one partner, or both, views his or her ways as right or good, or better than those of the other person, resentment and tension result. Ellen, a third-generation Irish American, learned her script well. Suffer in silence. Jack, a third-generation Jewish American, learned his script well too. Blow off the steam. His explosive exchanges with his mother were traumatic for Ellen. They never settle anything. Her non-confronting, avoidant contract with her mother infuriated Jack. They never settle anything. Learning to appreciate these differences was a major contributor to their well-being. Many skills and attitudes useful in handling conflicts have been presented in earlier chapters. These include the system's view and approaches to listening, self-disclosure, and assertion. We've also described a host of obstacles to good conflict resolution. One way of reducing the occasions for extended conflict involves finding and acknowledging each person's areas of competence, responsibility, and investment. Left undone, a question of who does what has to be renegotiated and redecided whenever it comes up. When people are clear about authority and responsibility, state Lederer and Jackson, it does not create a rigid relationship, but a flexibility which is impossible in a chaotic one. It conserves energy and time, leaving room for humor, good cheer, and experimentation. They also suggest that where partners are given to power struggles, they can explicitly take turns making decisions. My wife and I had the opposite problem. Each of us attempted to defer to the other's wishes. Either one is all right with me. Which would you prefer? Oh, both are all right. You can decide. No, really, I can go with your preference. But I genuinely don't care. There must be one you like better. Oh, never mind. The movie started 10 minutes ago. In most cases, neither of us was totally impartial. Each of us usually had some small preference, but we learned to ask, do you even have the slightest leaning toward either one? Frequently, our slight leanings were in the same direction. Winning and losing. In a win-lose context, one of us loses what the other wins. I seek to take the prize, to force you to capitulate, or to put you down and come out one up. The objective, writes social psychologist Ronald J. Fisher, is to defeat the adversary to reach your goal. This fixed pie assumption, that what one party gains, the other loses, often means that creative solutions that might increase the size of the pie are never even imagined. There is also, notes Fisher, the time-honored lose-lose strategy in which neither you nor I get what we want. I assume that getting what I want is better than losing it all, and that confrontation and disagreement are to be avoided at all costs. We then settle for a quickie solution instead of working to find an enduring resolution. Splitting the difference without a fuller exploration can be either win-lose or lose-lose, depending on the situation. This includes lawsuits, divorce trials, and other courtroom settlements. Such settlements seldom meet the criterion that the outcome is the best available for everyone concerned. Jesus recognized that truth and attached great importance to people's resolving their conflicts amicably. And why can you not judge for yourself what is the right course? While you are going with your opponent to court, make an effort to settle with him while you are still on the way. Luke 12:59. The resolution approach is a conscious, systematic attempt to maximize the gains of both parties. The conflict is seen as a mutual problem to be solved rather than as a war to be won or a battle to be avoided. Conflict resolution as a process leads to mutually satisfactory agreements with long-term commitments from both or all parties. Fisher uses the term conflict termination when undesirable outcomes are enforced or accepted in the short term. To the degree that I live my life win-lose, I can only win by the other person's losing. So even when I win, I have only losers to relate to. Win-lose is a one-up, one-down relationship. If I'm one down, I'm likely to resent the person who's one up. Go ahead, be the winner, all by yourself. When we play win-lose, the deck is stacked against both of us. Whatever you do, I can find a way to have you wrong, so I can feel superior or cover up my painful feelings if you win. And since you're likely to resent me when you lose, if you're important to me, that's a loss for me too. At the level where it counts, the level of loving, caring, trusting, and being good to each other, no one wins a win-lose game. And it doesn't do much for our feelings of security either. For most of us, the habits of living win-lose are old and well-worn. Through a conflict resolution approach, however, we can find win-win solutions. Here are some guidelines toward that end. 6 ingredients in resolving conflicts. 1. Fight clear and clean. I don't bring up other important but unrelated and distracting subjects like your weight or drinking problem, and you keep away from ancient history that supports your claim to my derelictions. Fighting clean includes 2 elements. A. Respect. No character assassination or other put-downs. B. Confining our exchange to the matter at hand. 2. Detach from ego struggles. Sometimes the substance of my conflict is my insistence on winning. Then I want to find a way to let go of my position. Okay, it's no big thing. I especially want to be willing to do this with children who are involved in a process of defining their identities, in part by disagreeing with someone else. My body tells me when my ego is attached. Clenched teeth as well as tight fists, shoulders, stomach, brows, or sphincter tell me clearly what's at stake. The instant I let go of my position, so long as I don't feel diminished in doing so, I relax. 3. Breathe. When I find myself in a conflict, I can notice my breathing. Is it extremely shallow? Am I not breathing at all? Starting to breathe again opens me to hearing both your deeper feelings and my own. 4. Call a ceasefire when appropriate. In the middle of a fight that's going nowhere and getting nastier, disengage. Wait a minute, I feel lousy with what we're doing. I want to table this for now and come back to it when we're both feeling better. 5. Non-assaultive humor can reduce tension. Finding something funny in the situation can help keep a disagreement from becoming a fight or a small conflict from escalating into a large one. I do want to be alert to how I might abuse humor as an avoidance process. I can be very unfunny in my denial. 6. Dialoguing out loud can be useful and also a source of comic relief. In the middle of a monologue, I might change voices and tell myself, "Listen, know-it-all, she can't get a word in edgewise, so how do you expect to deal with her feelings? Kindly shut up and let her talk." Such overt self-confrontation can be profoundly reassuring to both of us, especially when I follow my directive. Through such statements, I'm sharing with you a broader spectrum of what's happening in me and moving out of a narrow polarization. We don't have to resolve all our conflicts. Some are small enough to throw in the garbage can and forget. Though if they're not small enough for that, I'll cause myself trouble if I pretend they are. They'll get smellier instead of disappearing. Other conflicts seem large until I realize that they're my shadow plays as I project negative intentions onto another person or group. When I work through my own unfinished business, such projections are less frequent and intrusive. Today, church leaders of a number of faiths, disillusioned at the nuclear threat to humanity and violations of human rights, have begun to show that confrontation can be a manifestation of love rather than a vehicle of hostility. Our mind-body connections can help us stay in touch with ourselves and each other as we deal with difficult situations. Social contracts. Jean-Jacques Rousseau observed in 1762 that every human relationship involves some kind of contract. Sometimes it's explicit, as in business. More often, it's tacit or implicit, mutually accepted but not stated, or perhaps even unrecognized or inherent in the nature of the situation. My wife and I have talked extensively about what we are willing to do for each other, and about the ways in which we want to be sure we keep our own identities. We've written down important agreements that we came to. Whenever one of us becomes dissatisfied with something in our contract, we can bring that item up to renegotiate. We can, by mutual consent, change it to fit changes in our lives. When we were getting ready to have our first child, we went through the process again, creating another contract that dealt specifically with what we wanted from each other in regard to our child. It has been a source of support ever since. Quid pro quos. A quid pro quo is a kind of contract, usually implied rather than explicit. Quid pro quo is a Latin phrase that means something for something. If you do so and so, I'll respond with such and such. Through this process, each of us gets something we want. But if people think they've agreed on a set of conditions, and one person decides he or she didn't mean it that way, look out. The national budget is a well-known result of quid pro quos. Mutually nourishing quid pro quos take time to develop. Those made quickly are likely to leave too little room for change and to imprison the partners in rigid roles. Implied and explicit contracts. In most cases, a relationship, family, or other social institution is better equipped to meet the needs of everyone in it when the expectations and commitments are clear and explicit than when they depend on tacit agreements. As an example of how the latter can cause trouble, parents may subcontract to avoid noticing certain things. When we collude to ignore the things that might cause us pain, we mutually agree to avoid what, paradoxically, we ultimately cannot avoid. When we strive to define what in fact our contract is, we're less likely to abide by subcontracts than are destructive. Major conflict in relationships, separation, and divorce. In 1980, there was one divorce for every 2 marriages in the United States. Some of those separations could have been avoided had the partners been more effective at resolving conflicts, and some of the unavoidable ones could have been less painful. Separation, or divorce, leads to restructured or redesigned relationships rather than to a total end to contact. Parents who divorce are still the parents of their children, and ironically are now part of each other's extended families. The enduring bitterness and rancor that so often accompany a divorce can be avoided. In California, mediation has been so successful that in 1981, the California Family Law Act was enacted, requiring all contested custody cases go through mediation rather than directly into the adversary proceedings of the courtroom. The American Association for Mediated Divorce, based in California, is an informational network for such mediation services. Parents who choose this service are much more likely to retain an active caring for each other and the children, and often comment that those skills learned in the course of mediation might have salvaged their marriage had they been available to them earlier. Following a divorce or separation, children can find themselves in either a single-parent family or a blended family, or perhaps first one and later the other, as well as still being part of the larger restructured family that includes the parent they're not living with at a given time. Both adults and children in such families face the challenge of not closing up and closing off emotionally. When a family restructures, it's crucial to reassure the children that they'll have access to both parents and to follow through on that, especially during the critical separation period, to reduce fears that one or the other parent might disappear. In such a restructuring, I need to remember that the conflicts and arguments with the other parent are mine, and the children have a right to keep their relationship with him or her unspoiled and intact. Out of my anger at my ex-mate, I can try to form an alliance with the child against the other parent. I want to avoid that for two reasons. First, it is in the relationship between the child and the other parent, and that hurts the child. Second, it's likely to cause additional needless conflict. In addition, in Satir's words, no one can feel good about himself if he feels he comes from devils and bad people. Even one devil and one angel is only half okay. The statement that's important for a child to hear is that when two parents decide to live apart, it's not because anyone is bad, but because they've decided that they can no longer live together without hurting each other too much. Blended families combine parts of previous families. An adult with one or more children forms a relationship with another adult who may or may not also have children. Trouble may arise when members think they should feel loving toward all the new members of the blended family. They're likely to feel both guilty and resentful. Things become easier if all concerned follow several principles. 1. Everyone is allowed to have whatever feelings they have. A child doesn't have to love the new parent, nor a parent love the new child. Julie, who married Tom after she and her son Davy had lived alone for 3 years, felt resentful because she wanted Tom to love Davy as she did, and he didn't. Tom was unhappy because Davy was Julie's first priority. When Tom acknowledged Davy as Julie's top priority, but realized that she had plenty of love and time for him too, and Julie accepted that while Tom loved her deeply, his and Davy's relationship was presently mutually respectful, but not more than that. They started living together more comfortably. 2. A step-parent does not have to, and usually cannot, take the place of the absent parent. When adults form a new relationship, says Sater, the children need to be allowed to keep a place for their original parents and be helped to find a way to add another parent. 3. The new partner's place is in the blended family as a participating member, not standing on the sidelines. A person who remarries may treat his or her own children as private property, either to avoid imposing a handicap on the new mate or for fear that the new partner might not act as desired toward them. Bob was confused by Tina's attitudes in this area. Her children were hers, yet she expected Bob to be the more assertive in his support for her disciplinary acts. Voicing her concerns and acknowledging her need to control went a long way toward resolving this issue. 4. Expectations based on the ghosts of past relationships need to be overcome. If my previous partner died or was killed, I may idealize that person. No one can ever live up to the standard he or she set. After a divorce, by contrast, the new partner may be expected to be much better than the old one, even if he or she isn't. Negotiation, attitudes, and tactics. Currently, effective counseling holds that when we state explicitly what we want, what we can give easily, and what we have a hard time offering, we have a foundation of clarity and trust for negotiations that stabilize relationships. As we learn to bargain in ways that respect both you and your interests, and me and mine, our conflicts become less traumatic and sometimes even useful. An effective conflict resolution process includes both an attitude and a method. The attitude is a willingness to actively try to provide the things that matter most to both of us. As participants in a relationship, we're better off being partly altruistic, acting to maximize our joint outcomes, than being wholly so, acting strictly to maximize the other person's outcomes. We might go to your first choice event today and my first choice next time. An effective negotiation process, suggests Tessina and Smith, usually includes these steps. 1. Define the problem to yourself. 2. Agree to negotiate. 3. Set the stage. 4. State and explore wants. 5. Negotiate explicitly. 6. Confirm decision and restate. This method of negotiation starts with each of us stating what we believe we want, even though that may be very different from what the other person wants us to want. It goes on to exploring all the possibilities in the situation so we don't get stuck in the either or of what you and I asked for and overlook a better option that would maximize our joint outcome. Next, we identify those elements of what we want that mean most to each of us and which mean least. Then we go on to, I'll give a little here where it's less important to me if you give a little there where it's less important to you. Sometimes that takes the form of, listen, you really care about this, so today I'm willing to do exactly what you want, so long as I trust that on another occasion you'll do the same for me. Other times it may involve haggling until we hit on something we both consider fair. Finally, we restate our agreement so that we're both clear about it. The process, as just described, sounds deceptively simple because it leaves out the complications that make having a method necessary at all. For instance, I feel surprised and angry at what you want. You respond to my feeling as if it will lead where it led when your parent felt that way. I feel unheard and misunderstood and say some unkind words. These provoke you to think, damned if I'll give him what he wants. I stomp out and slam the door, and both of us wish we'd never mentioned the matter. The detailed steps in negotiation are designed to decrease misunderstandings, slow down the fast pace of interaction that leads to erroneous assumptions and regrettable retorts, and help us both to get what we want. If you and another person have a hard time resolving some issues, it's important to move through the following process slowly, one step at a time. Where you resolve matters relatively easy, you can take shortcuts, adding points you've overlooked to your existing process. Now, step by step. 1. Define the problem to yourself. Describe what you want. Don't worry about how the other person will respond. Focus on what you do want, not what you don't want. This moves your process toward being a constructive one and away from being a critical one likely to leave the other person feeling belittled and threatened. 2. Agree to negotiate. I'd like to discuss the way we coordinate our time looking after the kids. Is now a good time, or would later be better? By being flexible about when we negotiate, notes George Bach, I avoid jumping on you in a way that causes you to feel ambushed. But it's equally important to firmly insist on a commitment to an acceptable time and place within a day or two. Okay, if not now, when? Not getting around to it can be a way to avoid a request for a change. Times that are not good for negotiating are when both of us feel grumpy, tired, hassled, or when we're likely to be interrupted. It's also important to avoid overloading. Resolving one item at a time is enough. 3. Set the stage. This involves creating a positive frame of mind. It can involve articulating the larger framework of common goals that we share to establish a cooperative context. It may include reassuring you that I care for you, that I want an agreement so we can both live with it, and that I'll talk it through with you until we reach some resolution rather than walking out. It also means identifying my acknowledged feelings of hurt and anger so I don't use them to sabotage you while we negotiate. 4. State and explore wants. Communication here involves contact and communion. I need to say what I want and feel clearly and specifically, while avoiding trying to dictate how you should behave or dwelling on what you've done in the past. How you should respond to my wants is yet to be negotiated. When you hear my request, you may explain your actions, agree with my request, reject my complaint, or my next step is to reflect back your response and check whether I've reflected correctly. Then, if your response was an explanation or rejection, I can assertively repeat my request and incorporate what I just learned from you, hoping that the latter step helps you feel heard and increases the likelihood that you'll listen to me too. Okay, I didn't realize how important it was for you to have that free time this morning. I'd still like to know in advance if you're going to ask me for time on a day when I'm planning to write. If you're the one asking for change, I need to remember that it's your right to want whatever you want, even if it's not what I want you to want. It's also my job to accurately hear what you want. If your request is unclear, I may ask you to clarify it. 5. Negotiate explicitly. This is the horse trading stage. I'm willing to, if you'll, At this stage, it's crucial to assure completed communication. A completed communication consists of the following stages. A, the first speaker makes a statement. B, the recipient acknowledges the statement, showing that he or she heard it. C, the original speaker acknowledges the acknowledgement. For example, A, then you'll take the kids swimming once a week. B, either Tuesday or Thursday. C, thanks. 6, confirm decision and restate. This is to make sure we're clear about our agreement. If it's complicated, we should write it down. At least we restate and acknowledge it. Then we agreed, I'll take them swimming on Thursday. Right, Thursdays it is. In negotiating, I want to keep away from using external criteria to measure what I, you, or we do. Citing what the Joneses do is a manipulative ploy rather than a fair bargaining tactic. It's all too easy for me to quote the standard that supports my view. Whatever the nature, source, and outcome of a conflict, when all else fails, sometimes it helps to recall Samuel Johnson's words. I dogmatize and am contradicted, and in this conflict of opinions and sentiments, I find delight. End of chapter 27.